Sophia sat at the edge of her bed, swinging her legs excitedly. She had waited for this day for weeks. Her school play was finally here, and she couldn't wait for her father to see her perform. She'd been practicing her lines every night with her mother, who always told her she was a star in the making. But it wasn't just her performance that excited her, it was the promise her father had made. He had said, "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart," and Sophia clung to those words like a treasure. The auditorium was buzzing with laughter and chatter as parents filled the seats. Sophia peeked from behind the curtains, searching for her father. Her heart jumped when she saw the familiar tie her dad always wore to work. But her excitement quickly dissolved when the man turned his head, revealing it wasn't him. She returned backstage, biting her lip to hold back tears. When it was her turn to step onto the stage, Sophia hesitated. Her teacher gave her a reassuring nod, and she reluctantly walked into the spotlight. The sea of faces before her was a blur as she searched for her father once more. He wasn't there. With a heavy heart, she recited her lines, her voice trembling slightly. The applause at the end did little to lift her spirits. At home that night, her mother hugged her tightly. "You did great, sweetheart," she said. Sophia smiled faintly, but her heart ached. When her father returned home late, smelling of coffee and exhaustion, he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sophia. Daddy will come to the next one, I promise." She nodded silently, but deep down, the first crack in her faith had formed. It wasn't the first time Mr. Daniel had missed something important, but this time felt different. He had seen the disappointment in Sophia's eyes when he got home. It lingered in his mind as he poured himself a glass of water, replaying the scene in his head. He had every intention of going to her school play, but an unexpected client meeting had run late. "I'll make it up to her," he thought.
The next morning, Daniel sat at the breakfast table, determined to fix things. "Sophia," he began, smiling warmly, "I'm so proud of you for your play. I heard you were amazing." Sophia looked up from her cereal, her expression unreadable. "Thanks, Daddy," she muttered. "I'll be there for your next event," Daniel promised, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You can count on me." Sophia gave him a small smile, but her mother, who was washing dishes nearby, gave him a skeptical glance. Daniel caught her expression and sighed. "I'm trying," he said under his breath. As the day went on, Daniel buried himself in work, as he always did. He told himself he was doing this for his family, for Sophia. Every extra hour he put in, every missed event, was meant to secure their future. But he failed to see the gap growing between him and his daughter. Sophia, on the other hand, learned to smile through her disappointment, telling herself that maybe next time would be different. Little did Daniel know that his repeated excuses were creating a wall between them, one broken promise at a time. Sophia's young heart was resilient, but even she had her limits. For now, she held on to hope, though it was beginning to waver. The day of the dance recital was finally here, and Sophia was beaming with excitement. She had spent weeks perfecting her routine, staying late after school to practice with her classmates. Her pink tutu sparkled under the bright lights of the auditorium, and her hair was neatly tied into a bun. Sophia's mother helped her adjust her outfit as she whispered, "Your dad's going to be so proud of you tonight." Sophia smiled, gripping tightly onto the hope that this time would be different. Her father had promised her he wouldn't miss it. "I'll be sitting right in the front row, cheering you on," he had said. Those words replayed in her head as she waited backstage, her heart pounding with anticipation. As the curtains rose and the performance began, Sophia's eyes darted across the rows of parents. She scanned each face, searching for her dad's familiar figure. The music played, and the other girls twirled gracefully onto the stage, but Sophia stood frozen for a moment, her eyes still scanning the crowd. Her heart sank when she realized his seat was empty. With a deep breath, she forced herself to join the others, her movements mechanical and devoid of the joy she'd felt during rehearsals. Her mother's encouraging clap from the audience only reminded her of who wasn't there. The recital ended with thunderous applause, but Sophia felt none of it. She plastered on a smile as she curtsied, but inside, her heart ached. At home, her mother tried to cheer her up. You were wonderful out there, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Sophia nodded quietly, but her disappointment was palpable. When her father came home late that night, she was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. He kissed her forehead and whispered another apology, but this time it didn't feel like enough. Sophia's 9th birthday was meant to be special. Her mother had planned a small party with a few close friends, complete with a cake decorated in Sophia's favorite color, purple. But what Sophia really wanted was for her dad to be there. "Daddy's going to come, right?" she asked her mother that morning. "Of course, sweetie. He said he'd try his best," her mother replied, avoiding eye contact. Sophia spent the day excitedly greeting her friends, playing games, and cutting her cake. Each time the doorbell rang, her heart leapt with hope, only to be disappointed when it was another neighbor or relative arriving. As the sun began to set, her smile faltered. "Maybe he got stuck at work," her mother offered gently, noticing Sophia's quiet demeanor. "I'm sure he wanted to be here." But Sophia didn't want excuses. She wanted her dad. By the time the party ended, Sophia sat on the couch, clutching a piece of cake she had saved for him. When her father finally arrived, it was almost midnight. He looked disheveled and tired, holding a small gift bag. "Happy birthday, Princess," he said, kneeling in front of her. Sophia looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "You missed it," she whispered. "You weren't here." Daniel sighed deeply, guilt washing over him. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I had an important meeting I couldn't get out of. But I brought you a gift." He handed her the bag, but Sophia barely glanced at it. She placed the untouched slice of cake on the table and walked to her room without a word. That night, Daniel sat alone in the living room, staring at the cake. It was the first time he truly felt the weight of his absence. Sophia wasn't a little girl who would easily forgive anymore. He promised himself he'd do better, but the cycle of broken promises was far from over. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement as proud parents filled the seats for the annual awards ceremony. Sophia had worked harder than ever that year, and her efforts had paid off. She was set to receive the award for outstanding academic achievement, a moment she had dreamed of. As she sat in her seat, clutching the edge of her chair, she whispered to her mother, "Do you think Daddy's coming?" Her mother's face softened, and she placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "He promised, honey," she said, though her tone carried doubt. Sophia looked around, watching as other parents settled in, some holding flowers, others with cameras ready. The ceremony began, and student after student went up to receive their awards. Each time a name was called, Sophia's heart raced, hoping her father would walk through the doors any minute. When her name was finally announced, the crowd erupted in applause. Sophia walked to the stage with her head held high, her eyes scanning the crowd one last time. His seat was still empty. The principal handed her the plaque, and Sophia smiled politely for the photo. Inside, her heart ached. At home, the plaque was placed on the mantel, a silent reminder of her achievement and her father's absence. Later that night, Daniel came home, briefcase in hand, looking drained. "Sophia, I'm so proud of you," he said as he noticed the award. Sophia, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, looked at him coldly. "You weren't there," she said bluntly. "I know, Princess, and I'm sorry. Work ran late again," he said, his voice filled with regret. "It always does," Sophia replied quietly before walking to her room, leaving Daniel standing there, overwhelmed with guilt. For the first time, he wondered if his priorities were costing him more than he realized. Sophia's mother had planned a family picnic, hoping it would mend some of the tension brewing between Sophia and her father. She packed a basket with all of Sophia's favorites, fried chicken, sandwiches, and lemonade, and reminded Daniel about the outing multiple times. "Don't forget, Daniel, she needs this," her mother had said the night before. On the morning of the picnic, Sophia wore her favorite sundress and carried a soccer ball under her arm. She hadn't spent quality time with her father in weeks, and though she didn't say it, she was excited about the idea of him playing with her. The minutes turned into hours as Sophia and her mother waited in the park. Sophia kicked the ball around aimlessly, her eyes darting toward the parking lot every few minutes. Her mother sat on the blanket, trying to keep a smile on her face. "Why don't we eat, honey?" she suggested. "Number Daddy will be here soon," Sophia replied stubbornly. But he never came. Daniel arrived home late that evening, full of apologies. "I completely lost track of time, and the client meeting went on longer than expected," he explained. Sophia didn't respond. She locked herself in her room and refused to come out for dinner. In her room, she clutched the photo album she had started making. It was supposed to be filled with happy memories of her and her dad, but so far, the pages remained empty. For the first time, Sophia began to wonder if he truly cared about spending time with her, or if work would always come first. Daniel, on the other hand, felt the weight of the missed picnic. But as always, he reassured himself, "I'll make it up to her next time." He didn't realize how few next times he had left. It was the highlight of the school's annual sports day, a father-daughter race where pairs competed to win a special trophy. Sophia had always imagined herself and her dad racing together. She had even told her classmates that her father was fast and would help her win. The night before the race, she excitedly laid out her sneakers and her favorite tracksuit. Over dinner, she looked at her dad with wide eyes. "You'll be there, right, Daddy? It's tomorrow at noon." Daniel nodded confidently. "Of course, Sophia. I wouldn't miss it for anything," he said. He truly meant it, but as always, work had other plans. The next day, the school grounds were alive with cheers and laughter. Fathers and daughters stood side by side, ready for the race. Sophia stood near the starting line, nervously clutching her hands as she scanned the field. Her classmates laughed and joked with their dads, but Sophia's was nowhere to be seen. "Sweetheart, are you sure he's coming?" her mother asked gently, crouching beside her. Sophia nodded, though her voice wavered. "He promised." As the race began, Sophia stood frozen. The cheers around her felt distant as she watched other girls and their fathers sprint toward the finish line. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. When Daniel arrived at the school an hour later, the field was nearly empty. He spotted Sophia sitting alone on a bench, her tracksuit dusty from sitting in the grass. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I got caught in traffic after my meeting," he said, rushing toward her. She stood up and looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "I waited, Daddy," she whispered, "but you never came." Without another word, she walked to her mother's car, leaving Daniel standing in the fading sunlight, the weight of his broken promise crushing him. Sophia's piano teacher often praised her talent, saying she had a gift for music. After months of lessons and practice, Sophia was ready to perform at her first recital. She had spent hours perfecting the piece, and this time she decided to remind her dad every single day leading up to the event. "Don't forget, Daddy," she'd say as he left for work each morning. "The recital is on Friday at 6 p.m. "I know, sweetheart," he'd reply, smiling. "I'll be there, I promise." Friday evening arrived, and Sophia stood backstage, adjusting her bow tie and nervously running her fingers over the piano keys. Her mother gave her a reassuring hug. "You're going to do great, honey," she said, "and your dad will be so proud when he sees you." But as Sophia stepped onto the stage, her heart sank. Her father's seat was empty. She took a deep breath and began to play, pouring her emotions into every note. The applause at the end was thunderous, but it felt hollow to her. After the recital, Sophia sat on the school steps, her plaque in her hands. Her classmates left with their parents, chatting excitedly about their performances. Sophia's mother sat beside her, holding her hand. "Maybe something came up at work?" she said softly, though the words felt like a weak excuse. Daniel arrived home late that night, guilt written all over his face. "How did it go, Princess?" he asked. "I don't want to talk about it," Sophia said quietly, walking to her room. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Sophia's piano used to be before it was moved to the recital hall. He didn't just miss the performance, he was beginning to realize he was missing out on her life. The annual school science fair was Sophia's chance to showcase her creativity. This year, she had built a solar-powered water filtration system, an ambitious project for her age. Her teachers were impressed, and her mother beamed with pride. But the person she wanted to impress the most was her father. The night before the event, Sophia went over her presentation with her mother. "Do you think Daddy will like it?" she asked, her voice tinged with hope. Her mother hesitated before replying, "He'll be proud of you no matter what." The next morning, Sophia woke up early and packed her materials carefully. At the fair, the gymnasium was filled with colorful displays and eager students explaining their projects to curious parents. Sophia's table stood out with its intricate design and detailed presentation board. As parents walked from table to table, Sophia kept glancing toward the door, waiting for her father to walk in. She pictured him nodding proudly as she explained how her invention worked. But as the hours passed, her optimism faded. "Where's your dad?" a classmate asked innocently. Sophia forced a smile. "He's busy at work," she said, though her voice cracked slightly. When the judges came to her table, Sophia presented her project flawlessly, earning their admiration. She even won first place, but the victory felt hollow. She clutched her trophy as her classmates celebrated with their families. Later that night, when her father came home, she placed the trophy on the dining table without a word. Daniel picked it up, examining the engraved plaque. "First place? That's amazing, Sophia," he said, beaming. Sophia didn't respond. Instead, she quietly said, "It doesn't matter if you're not there to see it." Her words cut deep, leaving Daniel speechless as she walked away. Sophia had been looking forward to summer camp for months. It was her first time going away on her own, and she was both nervous and excited. She packed her bags carefully, including the sketchbook she used to doodle pictures of her family, images of what she wished life was like. Her mother drove her to the camp drop-off, and as they arrived, Sophia scanned the crowd. Other kids were hugging both their parents, taking pictures, and saying goodbye. Sophia's heart sank when she realized her father wasn't there. "He promised he'd come to see me off," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Her mother tried to console her. "Maybe something urgent came up at work, honey. You know he loves you." Sophia nodded but remained silent. She hugged her mother tightly before boarding the bus. As it pulled away, she glanced out the window one last time, hoping to see her father rushing in. But the only person waving goodbye was her mom. At camp, Sophia threw herself into activities, archery, crafts, and canoeing, but there was always a part of her that felt hollow. When other kids shared stories about their families during campfires, Sophia stayed quiet. Meanwhile, back home, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the sticky note on his computer that read, "Sophia's camp drop-off, 10 a.m." He had missed it because of an unscheduled client call. He called his wife that evening, asking, "Did Sophia leave okay?" "She did," her mother replied tersely. "But she noticed, Daniel. She always notices." The conversation ended, leaving Daniel feeling emptier than ever. He realized he was losing something more valuable than any client, his daughter's trust. Father's Day was always a special occasion at Sophia's school. Each class organized a small celebration where students could share handmade cards and gifts with their fathers. This year, Sophia had crafted a beautiful card with glitter, her neat handwriting spelling out, "To the best dad, with love." She was proud of her creation and couldn't wait to give it to him. The morning of the celebration, Sophia woke up early, her card tucked carefully into her bag. "Daddy, don't forget to come today," she said, as she watched him hurriedly sip his coffee and grab his briefcase. "I won't forget, Princess. I'll see you at 2 p.m., he replied, kissing her on the forehead before rushing out the door. At school, the event was filled with laughter as fathers and their children shared snacks and played games. Sophia's teacher called out, "Next up, Sophia!" Sophia hesitated, glancing at the empty chair beside her. The other kids whispered as she walked to the front of the room. She held up her card and smiled faintly. "I made this for my dad. He's really busy, but he's the best," she said, her voice trembling. When she sat back down, her teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. But Sophia couldn't hold back the tears that welled up in her eyes. Later that evening, Daniel returned home to find Sophia's card on the kitchen table. The glitter sparkled under the light, and he felt a lump form in his throat as he read her words. He walked into her room, where she sat silently reading a book. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "It's okay," Sophia replied without looking up, but they both knew it wasn't okay. As Sophia grew older, she began to expect less from her father. The cycle of promises and excuses had become routine, and her hope that things would change had dwindled. One Saturday morning, however, her father made a bold declaration. "I'm taking you out today," Daniel announced over breakfast. "Just the two of us. We'll go wherever you want. Ice cream, the park, anything." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really? Promise?" "Promise," he said confidently, reaching across the table to ruffle her hair. Sophia spent the morning getting ready, choosing her favorite dress and packing a small bag with snacks. She sat by the window, waiting eagerly for her father to finish his work call. The clock ticked away as hours passed, and Sophia's excitement turned to disappointment. "Daniel, you promised her," her mother said sternly, standing at the doorway of his home office. "I know, I just need to finish this," he replied, typing furiously on his laptop. By the time Daniel emerged from his office, the sun had already set. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her bag still packed. Her dress was wrinkled from sitting for so long, and her face was blank. "Princess, I'm so sorry," Daniel began, but she interrupted him. "Don't call me that," she said quietly, standing up and walking to her room. For the first time, Daniel felt the full weight of his actions, or lack thereof. He had always assumed there would be another opportunity, another day to make it up to her. But as the door to Sophia's room closed behind her, he realized he was running out of chances. Sophia's 13th birthday marked a shift in their relationship. She was no longer the little girl who clung to promises and excuses. By now, she had learned to expect disappointment, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Her teenage years brought new milestones, and each one was met with a familiar absence. On the morning of her birthday, she woke up to the smell of pancakes and her mother's cheerful singing. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," her mom said, placing a plate with a candle in front of her. Sophia smiled faintly, her thoughts already drifting to her father. "Is Dad coming home early today?" she asked cautiously. Her mother hesitated, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "He said he'll try, honey. You know how busy he is." Sophia's smile faded. She knew what "try" meant. It meant he wouldn't show up. That evening, her friends came over for a small party, laughing and singing as they played games and cut her cake. Sophia smiled and joined in, but her eyes kept drifting to the front door. Each knock made her heart jump, only to be met with another guest or delivery. When the party ended and the house grew quiet, Sophia sat on the couch, staring at the half-eaten cake. Her mother gave her a tight hug, but no words of comfort could ease the ache in her chest. Daniel came home long after midnight, carrying a small gift bag. "Happy birthday, Princess," he whispered, placing the bag on the table. Sophia looked at him, her eyes cold. "You always come late. Why even bother?" she said before storming off to her room. Daniel sat down, staring at the untouched plate of food left for him. He had always believed he was doing his best for his family, but now he was beginning to see how much he had lost in the process. Sophia entered high school with a mix of nerves and excitement. She was eager to make new friends and prove herself, especially on the basketball court. She had always loved the game, and her coach saw potential in her. When tryouts for the school team were announced, Sophia practiced tirelessly, often staying late after school to perfect her skills. "I'm going to make the team, Mom," she said one evening, her cheeks flushed from running drills. "I know you will, sweetheart," her mother said with a smile. "Are you going to invite your dad to the first game?" Sophia hesitated. "I don't think he'd come," she said quietly, focusing on lacing her shoes. Her mother's face softened. "You should still tell him, Sophia. He loves you, even if he doesn't always show it." Sophia reluctantly mentioned the tryouts to her father that weekend. "I'm trying out for the basketball team on Monday. If I make it, there's a game next week," she said, her tone neutral. "That's amazing," Daniel said, smiling broadly. "I'll be there for your first game, I promise." Sophia's heart flickered with hope, but she quickly smothered it. Promises didn't mean much anymore. When the day of the game arrived, Sophia was both nervous and excited. She scanned the bleachers, hoping to see her father. Her mother was there, cheering loudly, but the seat next to her remained empty. Sophia played her heart out, scoring multiple points and helping her team win. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Sophia's eyes were glued to the empty space in the stands. Later that evening, Daniel congratulated her at home. "Your mom told me you were incredible out there," he said, smiling. "You could have seen it yourself," Sophia replied coldly, walking past him. For Daniel, her words felt like a slap, a painful reminder of all the moments he had missed. Sophia had always excelled academically, and her high school years were no different. She poured herself into her studies, determined to achieve something meaningful. Her teachers often praised her focus and resilience, unaware of the emotional wounds she carried. When report card day arrived, Sophia came home with a perfect GPA. Her mother was thrilled, hugging her tightly and displaying the report card on the fridge. "You're amazing, Sophia," her mom said, beaming with pride. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. "I heard someone's been making waves at school," he said, smiling as he sat at the dining table. "Let me see this report card." Sophia handed it to him, her expression blank. As he read through her grades, his smile widened. "Straight A's! I knew you had it in you, kiddo." Sophia folded her arms. "I work hard because I have to. It's not like I have you cheering me on at school events." Her words stung, and Daniel placed the report card on the table, his smile fading. "Sophia, I know I haven't been there as much as I should, but I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" Sophia shrugged. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like it." She picked up the report card and walked to her room, leaving Daniel sitting in silence. That night, he lay awake, replaying her words in his mind. He had always believed his hard work was for his family's future, but he was beginning to realize that no amount of success could replace the moments he had lost with his daughter. Sophia's dedication to academics and extracurricular activities finally paid off when she received the news she had been waiting for: a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. Her hard work, long nights, and relentless determination had earned her a future she dreamed of. But the moment felt bittersweet. The scholarship announcement was made during the school assembly, where students and faculty applauded Sophia for her achievements. She walked onto the stage to accept the certificate, her head held high but her heart heavy. She couldn't help but wish her father was in the audience to witness the moment. That evening, her mother greeted her with a hug and tears of joy. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," she said, holding the scholarship letter. "This is just the beginning of all the amazing things you're going to do." Daniel came home later than usual, his tie loosened, and his face weary from another long day at work. "What's all the excitement about?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. Sophia hesitated before handing him the letter. "I got a full scholarship," she said, her voice flat. Daniel's face lit up as he read the letter. "Sophia, this is incredible. I always knew you could do it," he said, moving to hug her. She stepped back, her arms crossed. "You always knew, but you were never there to see it. Do you even know how many nights I stayed up studying? Or how many times I hoped you'd show up at school, but you didn't?" Daniel froze, guilt washing over him. "I know I've missed a lot, Sophia, but I'm so proud of you. I really am." Sophia shrugged and walked to her room. As Daniel sat at the dining table, staring at the letter, he realized that her success was also a testament to her independence, a painful reminder of how little she had relied on him to get there. The weeks leading up to Sophia's departure for college were filled with mixed emotions. Her mother busied herself helping Sophia pack, buying essentials, and giving advice about life away from home. Daniel, on the other hand, felt a growing sense of unease. "We should have a family dinner before you leave," Daniel suggested one evening. Sophia glanced at her mother, unsure. "Why? So you can show up late again?" she replied bluntly. "Sophia," her mother interjected softly, but the damage was already done. "I mean it," Sophia continued. "You've missed everything important in my life. Why should this be any different?" Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I want to make things right," he said quietly. Despite her reservations, Sophia agreed to the dinner. On the scheduled evening, her mother set the table with their best dishes, and Sophia wore a simple dress, her expression unreadable. Daniel arrived on time for once, but the tension in the room was palpable. As they ate, Daniel tried to start a conversation. "So, are you excited about college?" Sophia shrugged. "I guess." Her mother shot her a warning glance, but Sophia couldn't hold back. "You know, Dad, you're really good at showing up for the things that don't matter. Maybe you should have practiced that with the things that did." Daniel set his fork down, his face pale. "Sophia, I know I've failed you in a lot of ways, but I'm trying. Can't you see that?" Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Trying doesn't erase years of broken promises. She walked away, leaving Daniel sitting at the table, his appetite gone. That night, as he stared at the empty seat she had left behind, Daniel realized that her departure for college wasn't just a milestone. It was the beginning of a life that might no longer include him. Months passed, and Sophia adjusted quickly to college life. She excelled in her classes, joined several clubs, and made new friends. For the first time, she felt truly independent, free from the disappointment of unmet expectations. Daniel, however, felt the distance acutely. He called her often, leaving voicemails when she didn't pick up. "Hey, Sophia, just checking in, hope you're doing well. Call me when you can," his messages would say, but Sophia rarely returned them. One weekend, Daniel decided to surprise her with a visit. He drove for hours, rehearsing what he would say to her, imagining how happy she'd be to see him. When he arrived at her dorm, he knocked on the door, a bouquet of flowers in hand. Sophia opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I just wanted to see you," Daniel said, his voice uncertain. Sophia stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "You can't just show up unannounced. I'm busy." "I thought you'd be happy to see me," Daniel said, his heart sinking. Sophia crossed her arms. "Dad, you've spent my whole life being too busy for me. Why should I make time for you now?" Her words cut deeper than Daniel expected. "I know I've made mistakes, Sophia, but I'm here now, trying to fix them." Sophia shook her head. "You can't fix the past, Dad. Some things just don't get fixed." As she walked back into her dorm, Daniel stood there, the bouquet hanging limply at his side. He realized that no grand gesture could undo the years of absence and broken promises. For the first time, he truly feared he had lost her for good. Please subscribe to this channel, part 2 is coming. Don't forget to comment again. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. So anytime we post, you will be first to know. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. If you love this story and want to see what happens next, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss part 2. It's packed with even more twists, emotions, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world to me, and subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Stay tuned, part 2 is coming soon, and you won't want to miss it.